The exchange. Raven Thorn stood at the viewport of her ship, the Star Weaver, watching the massive space station rotate against a backdrop of swirling nebula clouds. The station's crystalline spires caught the light of distant stars, but she knew its beauty masked something far more sinister. Deep within those gleaming towers, one of the most dangerous beings in the outer rim waited for her. Trading Post Helios, this is Star Weaver requesting docking clearance, she transmitted, her fingers tracing the outline of the small device in her pocket. The artifact she'd discovered in the ruins of Epsilon 9 seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Clearance granted, Star Weaver. Proceed to Bay 17, came the automated response. As her ship glided toward the designated bay, Raven checked her equipment one last time. Her neural enhancer hummed quietly behind her left ear, processing data from the station's security feeds. The compact plasma pistol strapped to her thigh provided some comfort, though she hoped she wouldn't need it. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic thunk, and Raven took a deep breath. She'd faced dangerous situations before, that's how humans had carved out their place in the galaxy. But something about this meeting made her skin crawl. Two guards waited for her at the airlock, their scaled armor marking them as Draconians, Sovereign Calyryx's chosen enforcers. This way, one growled, leading her through winding corridors. The deeper they went, the more the station's luxurious facade gave way to utilitarian metal and strange technology. Ancient symbols glowed on the walls, reminiscent of those she'd found in the ruins. Finally, they reached a massive door that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Inside, Sovereign Calyryx's chamber stretched into shadow, its walls lined with artifacts from 100 worlds. The being himself sat on a floating throne, his form shrouded in shifting darkness except for 6 glowing eyes arranged in a perfect hexagon. The human arrives, Calyryx's voice resonated directly in her mind. Show me what you found. Raven approached cautiously, withdrawing the artifact. In the chamber's strange light, its surface rippled like liquid metal. As requested, though I'm curious why this particular piece interests you. A sound like crystalline wind chimes drew her attention to a corner of the room. There, suspended in a field of energy, floated a being unlike any Raven had seen before. Its body seemed composed of living crystal, with patterns of light flowing beneath translucent surfaces. Despite its imprisonment, it radiated a sense of ancient dignity. That curiosity, Calyryx rumbled, is not part of our arrangement. He gestured, and one of the guards brought forward a case filled with enough rare minerals to buy a small planet. Your payment. But Raven's attention remained fixed on the crystalline being. Its patterns had changed, forming symbols identical to those on the artifact. She'd learned enough of the ancient language to recognize a warning. Actually, she said carefully, I'd like to propose an alternative arrangement. The chamber's temperature seemed to drop several degrees as all 6 of Calyryx's eyes focused on her. The being in the containment field, what's their story? Nixis is the last of the Luminarans, Calyryx replied, amusement coloring his mental voice. A race of living crystals who once guided lesser species through the cosmos. Now, merely a curiosity in my collection. Raven met Nixis's gaze, seeing intelligence and something more, a desperate urgency. I want to trade for them instead of the minerals. Silence fell over the chamber, broken only by the soft hum of energy fields. Then Calyryx laughed, the sound like grinding stones. You would trade such power for a slave? I would trade for knowledge, Raven countered. The Luminarans were known for their wisdom, weren't they? Their understanding of cosmic forces. She held up the artifact. Perhaps even their understanding of things like this. Calyryx's eyes narrowed, then widened with sudden understanding. Clever human. You've recognized the connection. He leaned forward, darkness swirling around his throne. Very well. The artifact for the Luminaran. But know this, if you attempt to deceive me, there is nowhere in this galaxy you can hide. Deal, Raven said firmly, trying to ignore the warning pulses from both the artifact and her neural enhancer. She placed the device on a floating tray that carried it to Calyryx's waiting grasp. The containment field around Nixis dissolved, and the crystalline being floated gracefully to Raven's side. Up close, their form was even more remarkable, standing slightly taller than Raven with a face that seemed carved from living starlight. "Leave," Calyryx commanded. "Before I reconsider the wisdom of this exchange." They didn't need to be told twice. As they walked quickly back through the station's corridors, Nixis spoke directly into Raven's mind, their mental voice like chimes in a gentle breeze. "You should not have done this. The artifact dash. We'll have to wait until we're safely away," Raven interrupted softly. "Trust me, I have a plan." They reached the Star Weaver without incident, but Raven's neural enhancer was screaming warnings about multiple ships powering up in the station's bays. As soon as they were aboard, she ran for the cockpit. "Strap in," she called to Nixis. "This is about to get interesting." As the Star Weaver's engines roared to life, Raven allowed herself a small smile. She had traded an artifact for a being of living crystal, probably made an enemy of one of the most powerful entities in the Outer Rim, and was about to attempt an escape that would either be legendary or fatal. Just another day in the life of a human in space. Secrets in the stars. The Star Weaver burst through the station's defensive screen, its engines burning hot against the backdrop of swirling nebula clouds. Raven's fingers danced across the controls as proximity alarms screamed warnings about pursuing vessels. "They're deploying quantum nets," Nixis observed, their crystalline form pulsing with concerned patterns. "Calyryx means to capture rather than destroy." "Good thing I didn't give him the real artifact then," Raven replied with a grin, pulling a small device from a hidden compartment beneath her pilot's seat. Its surface swirled with the same liquid metal appearance as the one she'd handed over. Nixis's light patterns shifted in what might have been surprise. "You created a replica? How?" "Humans are pretty good at improvising," Raven said, executing a tight spiral to avoid incoming fire. "The original is safely hidden where I found it. What I need to know now is why it's so important that Calyryx would trade you for it." Before Nixis could answer, a massive energy surge lit up the sensor displays. The pursuing ships were charging weapons. "Perhaps this discussion would be better continued once we've escaped," they suggested. Raven nodded, her expression turning serious. "Hold tight." She engaged the Star Weaver's experimental quantum drive, a modification she'd never quite gotten to work properly. "Let's see if my latest tinkering paid off." The ship shuddered as reality twisted around them. For a moment, everything seemed to stretch into infinity, then snap back like a rubber band. When the view stabilized, they were several light-years away, floating in an unfamiliar star system. "That was not standard human technology," Nixis observed, their voice tinged with both approval and concern. "No," Raven agreed, running diagnostics on the smoking drive. "I may have borrowed some design concepts from those ruins where I found the artifact. Speaking of which." She held up the device. "Time for answers." Nixis's form dimmed slightly, their patterns becoming more subdued. "The artifact is part of an ancient network, created by my people to maintain cosmic balance. There are forces in this universe that seek to break down the barriers between dimensions. We Luminarans were their guardians." "Were?" Raven prompted gently. "Most of my kind were destroyed in a war we barely remember. Those who survived scattered, hiding our knowledge. Calyryx hunts us, seeking to unlock the power we once wielded." Nixis floated closer to the viewport, their crystalline form reflecting starlight. "The artifact you found is a key, one of many needed to access the network's full potential." Raven studied the device thoughtfully. "And if Calyryx gets his hands on enough of these keys? He could tear open the walls between realities, unleashing chaos in his bid for power." Nixis turned to face her. "Why did you save me?" "The truth, please." "Because I recognized the symbols you were forming in your containment field," Raven admitted. They matched inscriptions I found in the ruins, warnings about something called the Void Breach. I figured having someone who could actually read them might be helpful. A soft chiming sound emerged from Nixus, their version of laughter, Raven realized. Humans. Always mixing curiosity with practicality. You're right, of course. Those warnings speak of an ancient threat, one that nearly destroyed all reality. My people sealed it away, but the seals are weakening. The ship's sensors suddenly blared warnings. Multiple vessels were emerging from quantum space around them. Found us faster than I expected, Raven muttered, powering up weapons systems. Wait, Nixus moved to the sensor display, their patterns shifting rapidly. Those energy signatures, they're Luminaran. Indeed, the ships surrounding them were unlike anything Raven had seen before, crystalline structures that seemed to flow through space rather than cut through it. A transmission came through, not in words but in patterns of light and energy that Nixus quickly translated. They say. Nixus paused, emotion clear in their mental voice. They say they've been searching for survivors, gathering strength. They ask us to follow. Raven considered their options. Calorix would be hunting them, and the fake artifact wouldn't fool him for long. These Luminarans might be their best chance at understanding what they'd stumbled into, and how to prevent it from becoming a galaxy-wide catastrophe. Well, she said, adjusting course to follow the crystalline ships, I did want to learn more about your people's technology. Though I have to warn you, humans have a habit of improving on things we study. Nixus's patterns formed what Raven was beginning to recognize as amusement. Perhaps that's exactly what we need. The old ways failed us once. Maybe it's time for something new, a fusion of Luminaran wisdom and human ingenuity. As they followed the fleet into quantum space, Raven couldn't help but smile. She'd set out looking for valuable artifacts and instead found herself in the middle of an ancient conflict with reality itself at stake. The sensible thing would be to walk away. But humans had never been very good at sensible, especially when the fate of the galaxy was on the line. The crystalline ships led them deeper into uncharted space, their destination still unknown. But whatever challenges awaited them, Raven knew one thing for certain: the universe was about to learn why betting against humanity was always a losing proposition. Web of Deception. Deep within the heart of a crystalline sanctuary, hidden in a pocket of folded space, Raven stood before the Luminaran Council. Their massive chamber seemed built from living light, with 12 elder Luminarans floating in a circle above a platform of pure energy. The situation is graver than we feared, the first elder's thoughts resonated through the chamber. Calorix has already acquired 3 of the 7 keys. Nixus, now adorned with markings of their own council status, floated beside Raven. With the replica we provided, he believes he has 4. But that deception won't last long. Raven studied the holographic display showing the known locations of the remaining keys. These artifacts, they're not just keys to some cosmic lock, are they? They're part of the prison itself. Perceptive, another elder chimed. Each key maintains a portion of the dimensional barriers. Remove too many. And whatever's on the other side gets out, Raven finished. But why scatter them across the galaxy? Wouldn't keeping them together be safer? The chamber's light dimmed slightly as Nixus answered. Our ancestors believed dispersing them would prevent any single force from controlling all 7. They didn't anticipate someone like Calorix having the resources to hunt them systematically. Raven's neural enhancer pinged, processing data from the Starweaver's long-range sensors. Speaking of hunting, we've got company. Multiple ships just dropped out of quantum space at the edge of this system. The council chamber erupted in patterns of agitation. Impossible, an elder declared. This sanctuary is hidden behind quantum barriers and temporal shields. Unless, Nixus's patterns shifted to show concern, someone led them here. Raven was already moving, her enhanced reflexes carrying her toward the chamber's exit. We need to get to the Starweaver. Now. But before they could reach the door, the sanctuary's defenses activated. Crystalline barriers formed across every exit as alarms resonated through the structure. On the main display, dozens of ships appeared, not just Calyryx's forces, but vessels bearing markings of various criminal syndicates and forbidden technology cults. They're not just here for the keys, Raven realized, watching the tactical display. This is a coordinated attack. Someone told them about the Luminoran sanctuary. A traitor, one of the elders hissed, their crystalline form crackling with energy. Among our own kind. Nixus moved closer to Raven, their patterns showing determination. We need to reach the sanctuary's core. The knowledge stored there, in the wrong hands, would make the keys themselves look like toys, Raven finished. She pulled out her plasma pistol, checking its charge. I'm assuming there's a back way to this core. The first elder's form pulsed with approval. Through the maintenance conduits. Nixus knows the way. But be warned, the core's defenses will not distinguish friend from foe. Multiple explosions rocked the sanctuary as the attacking forces began their assault. The crystalline barriers at the chamber's exits shimmered and cracked under heavy fire. Go, the first elder commanded. We will hold them here as long as we can. The core must be protected at all costs. Nixus led Raven to a seemingly solid wall, their patterns triggering a hidden mechanism. A narrow passage appeared, glowing with the same living light as the rest of the sanctuary. The conduits were designed for maintenance drones, Nixus explained as they entered. They're shielded against most forms of detection. Most forms? Raven asked, her neural enhancer mapping their path through the complex network of tunnels. The traitor may know of them, Nixus admitted. We should hurry. They moved swiftly through the maintenance system, the sounds of battle growing more distant. Raven's enhancer kept track of multiple firefights throughout the sanctuary, marking the attackers' steady advance despite fierce Luminoran resistance. Your people are incredible fighters, she observed, watching energy patterns dance across her tactical display. We were once warriors as well as scholars, Nixus replied. Before we chose a path of peace. Perhaps that choice made us vulnerable. They reached a junction where multiple conduits converged. Ahead, a massive door pulsed with complex energy patterns that made Raven's enhancer glitch. The core's outer chamber, Nixus explained, moving to a control panel. Once inside, we can dash. The wall beside them exploded inward. Through the breach stepped a figure Raven recognized from wanted bulletins across 3 sectors, the Technomancer, a being more machine than organic, known for stealing and corrupting ancient technologies. Your sanctuary's defenses are impressive, the Technomancer's synthesized voice echoed through the conduit. But predictable, once you understand the patterns. They turned toward Nixus. Isn't that right, old friend? Raven's pistol was up in an instant, but Nixus's patterns had become chaotic, almost pained. You, they whispered. You're the traitor. Traitor implies betraying one's beliefs, the Technomancer replied. I simply recognized that our people's time has passed. The power we guard, it should be used, not hidden away. More explosions rocked the sanctuary. On Raven's tactical display, multiple hostile forces were converging on their position. Nixus, she said quietly, keeping her weapon trained on the Technomancer. Whatever history you have with them, we need to move. Now. But Nixus seemed frozen, their patterns showing a conflict of emotions. They were my mentor, before the fall. They taught me everything I know about the network, about our history. And now, the Technomancer added, extending a mechanical hand, I can teach you so much more. Join me. Help us unlock the true potential of what we guard. Raven's enhancer screamed warnings as energy built up around them. They were running out of time. The fate of not just the sanctuary, but possibly reality itself, hung on what happened in the next few moments. And somehow, Raven knew, it would come down to a choice, not between good and evil, but between holding on to the past and embracing an uncertain future. Breaking chains. The sanctuary shuddered as Nixus's form erupted in brilliant light, forcing both Raven and the Technomancer back. You taught me to protect, to preserve, their voice resonated with power. Not to destroy. Raven didn't waste the opportunity. Her neural enhancer calculated trajectories in microseconds as she fired 3 precise shots. The plasma bolts struck key points in the Technomancer's cybernetic armor, disrupting their shield systems. The core. Nixus called, already moving toward the massive door. Their patterns interfaced with the control panel, triggering emergency protocols. The Technomancer struggled to their feet, parts of their armor sparking. You cannot hide the truth forever. The barriers are failing. Change is coming. Change, Raven replied, backing toward the door, doesn't have to mean destruction. She fired again, collapsing part of the ceiling between them and their opponent. The core's door slid open with a crystalline chime. Inside, a vast chamber stretched into infinity, its walls lined with columns of pure data energy. At its center, a pillar of light reached from floor to ceiling, pulsing with patterns more complex than any Raven had seen. The sum of all Luminaran knowledge, Nixus explained, moving quickly to a control interface. And the true heart of the dimensional barriers. Raven's enhancer picked up multiple hostile signatures converging on their position. Whatever you're planning, do it fast. We've got company. Nixus's patterns became more intricate as they interfaced with the core systems. The Technomancer was right about one thing, the barriers are failing. But not because they're weak. Because they're fighting something. The pillar of light shifted, showing images that made Raven's blood run cold. Vast entities moved in the spaces between dimensions, pressing against reality itself. The barriers, represented as networks of golden energy, strained against their assault. The keys, Nixus continued, their form beginning to merge with the core's energy, they're not just locks. They're focus points, channeling the collective will of all sentient beings to maintain the barriers. Raven's tactical display lit up with warnings as the sanctuary's outer defenses began to fail. So Calaric's searching for them is weakening that collective will, creating gaps in the network. Nixus's patterns showed grim determination. But perhaps we can adapt. Change, as you said, without destruction. The chamber's entrance exploded inward. The Technomancer stood in the breach, their damaged armor now augmented with crystalline technology stolen from the sanctuary. Behind them, Calaric's forces and various other raiders prepared to storm the core. Nixus, Raven called, taking cover behind a data column. Whatever you're going to do. I need time, they responded, their form now almost completely merged with the core's energy. And I need your help. Human creativity, remember? Raven grinned, checking her pistol's charge. Just tell me what you need. Your neural enhancer, it can interface with the core's systems. Help me redesign the barrier network. Make it adaptable, like humans. Able to evolve against new threats. The raiders began their assault, filling the chamber with weapons fire and energy blasts. Raven returned fire while connecting her enhancer to the core interface. Her mind was flooded with data, patterns, and possibilities. Fascinating, the Technomancer's voice boomed through the chaos. You would trust a human to modify the work of our ancestors. Our ancestors, Nixus replied, their consciousness now spread through the core, would understand. They built the barriers to protect all life. And all life must have a say in their maintenance. Raven's fingers flew across the holographic interface as her enhanced mind processed centuries of Luminaran knowledge. She could see it now, the elegant but rigid structure of the original barriers. With subtle adjustments, drawing from humanity's greatest strength. Adaptability, she muttered, implementing changes even as she ducked another barrage. The barriers don't need to be stronger. They need to be smarter. The pillar of light began to pulse with new patterns, incorporating Raven's modifications. The Technomancer surged forward, realizing what was happening. No. The old ways must be preserved. But it was too late. Throughout the chamber, the data columns lit up with new energy as the barrier network began to transform. Raven's tactical display showed the changes spreading outward, rippling through space itself. The attacking forces faltered as the sanctuary's defenses evolved, adapting to their weapons and tactics in real time. The Technomancer's stolen crystalline technology began to fail as the very energy they had corrupted turned against them. In the center of it all, Nixus's consciousness directed the transformation, their patterns showing a mix of wonder and triumph. It's working. The barriers are no longer just resisting, they're learning, growing stronger with each attack. Raven smiled, even as she continued to defend their position. Humanity's greatest gift to the universe might not be technology or weapons, but something far simpler, the ability to adapt, to change, to find new solutions to ancient problems. The battle for the sanctuary's core wasn't over, but the tide had turned. And somewhere in the spaces between dimensions, the entities pressing against reality found themselves facing something new, barriers that could think, adapt, and evolve. Just like the humans who had helped modify them. Legacy of Light. The sanctuary's core chamber had become a battlefield of light and shadow. The modified barrier network pulsed with new energy, its patterns shifting and evolving in ways that made even the Luminoran system struggle to track. Raven's neural enhancer processed the data streams, showing her exactly what they'd created. Impossible, the Technomancer staggered back, their crystalline augmentations failing as the evolved defenses countered their every attempt at control. The barriers were perfect. They couldn't be improved. Nothing's perfect, Raven replied, moving to a better tactical position. That's what makes the universe interesting. Nixus's consciousness, still merged with the core systems, spread through the sanctuary. Their voice echoed with new power and understanding. The network is stabilizing. The new adaptive protocols are strengthening dimensional boundaries across the sector. Suddenly, multiple quantum breaches opened in the space around the sanctuary. But instead of hostile forces, crystalline ships of ancient design emerged, more Luminoran vessels, responding to Nixus's call. The scattered remnants of our people, Nixus explained, their patterns showing joy. They sense the change. They're coming home. The Technomancer's forces found themselves caught between the sanctuary's evolved defenses and the arriving Luminoran fleet. But it was Calyryx's sudden appearance in the core chamber that made Raven's blood run cold. The Dark Sovereign seemed larger somehow, shadows writhing around him as he held up the fake artifact. Clever deception, his mental voice boomed. But futile. I already have 3 genuine keys, and soon. You'll have nothing, Raven interrupted, her enhancer interfacing with the modified network. Check your prizes again. Calyryx's 6 eyes widened as the artifacts in his possession began to change, their surfaces flowing like liquid metal before dissolving completely. What have you done? The keys were never meant to be physical objects, Nixus explained, their consciousness briefly taking humanoid form beside Raven. They were focus points for collective will. And now, thanks to human insight, they've evolved beyond physical form. The sanctuary hummed with power as the barrier network continued to adapt and grow. On Raven's tactical display, she could see the dimensional boundaries strengthening, not through rigid resistance, but through constant evolution and change. The barriers protect reality, Raven added, allowing herself a small smile, by embracing the very thing you fear most, change. The Technomancer, their systems failing, looked at their former student with new understanding. We sought to preserve the old ways, but in doing so, we nearly destroyed everything. There's still a place for the old knowledge, Nixus assured them, their patterns showing compassion. But it must grow, adapt, learn from new perspectives. Calyryx, realizing his plans were unraveling, gathered his remaining power for one final assault. The shadows around him coalesced into writhing tentacles of void energy. Then I shall tear down everything. If I cannot rule reality, I will dash. He never finished the threat. The evolved barrier network responded instantly, not with brute force, but with adaptive countermeasures that turned his own power against him. The shadows dissolved, leaving the once mighty sovereign diminished and mortal. As Luminoran's ships secured the sanctuary and rounded up the remaining raiders, Raven watched the tactical displays show the changes spreading through space. The barriers between dimensions were no longer just walls, they were living systems, growing stronger with each challenge. So, she asked Nixis, whose consciousness was gradually returning to their crystalline form, what happens now? Now, Nixis replied, their patterns showing both wisdom and excitement, we build something new. The sanctuary will become a center of learning, where Luminoran knowledge and human adaptability can combine to protect reality in ways neither of us could achieve alone. The Technomancer, no longer a threat, looked at the modified core with wonder. Perhaps I could help. There is much to learn from these changes. There's much for all of us to learn, Raven agreed, her neural enhancer still processing the incredible amounts of data flowing through the sanctuary. That's kind of the point. As the crisis ended and the work of rebuilding began, Raven couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. What had started as a simple artifact hunt had evolved into something far more significant, a partnership between species that would help protect reality itself. The universe was changing, growing, adapting. And thanks to the unique combination of Luminoran wisdom and human ingenuity, those changes would make it stronger, not weaker. Nixis floated beside her as they watched new arrivals dock at the sanctuary. You know, they chimed softly, when you first traded for my freedom, I thought you were either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. And now? Now I think you were simply human. And that, it turns out, is exactly what the universe needed. As the sanctuary filled with beings from across the galaxy, all coming to learn and contribute to the new adaptive barrier network, Raven smiled. Humans had a habit of changing everything they touched, of finding new solutions to old problems. Today, that habit had helped save reality itself. Not bad for a day's work. The end.